Hello and welcome, fans of unusual computer stuff. Today we are going to observe PDA from 1997 again, but this time we will relocate from foggy Albion to the land of the rising sun. So I'm happy to present you Sharp mobilon hc-4500. From the naming we expect to hear a very long backstory, but surprisingly, there is not even a trace of it. Stop! What about mobilon hc-4000? It looks older than our device. This riddle is rather easy to solve. Both devices were released the same year, but they were different both in price and in components in order to be more successful in different niches of this market. We still have the main question. So, how did it all start there? All started from Microsoft, which was usual for those days. In the middle of 90s, Microsoft wanted to create more different and more interesting operating systems. But, unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, it was always the same Windows 95. Joking aside, the biggest part of the operating system code of our today's hero was taken from Windows 95. The OS, which I'm talking about, was created to run in low-performance hardware in condition of memory shortage. For example, OS core could start on the device just with 1 MB of RAM. But we'll talk about OS features later, and now let's return to the reasons why this was done. In 1993, Apple tried to create a breakthrough PDA. From these intentions we received Apple Newton, but there was no good PDA in it. The idea itself was exciting for many companies of the market. So, in the dark laboratories in Microsoft, a project WinPad was started. It was the answer to the Newton. Microsoft those times was mostly software-oriented company. Therefore, then it was needed to create some hardware. Microsoft preferred to use R&D groups outside the company. Make a long story short, companies like NEC, Motorola, Compaq and Sharp were involved in this project. Unfortunately, as they had to invent too much from the scratch and also due to Apple's dubious success that didn't add any enthusiasm to anyone, in 94 it was not possible to quickly release anything special. Later, thanks to effort of some companies on the market, interest in PDAs returned and was back to grow. Microsoft returned to an old project, but this time it was renamed to Pegasus. Perhaps based on naming, Pegasus was more real than WinPad, but it's only my thoughts. What exactly made this project unusual? Handwriting recognition was precisely the technology that trended the early 90s. But the problem was in the algorithms and computing power. Microsoft considered the situation and decided that they couldn't write software at that moment, but they cannot completely abandon touch input as well. Because of that, the stylus was usable in the first Windows CE devices, but it didn't go beyond mouse emulation. In 1996, the Comdex exhibition took place. Sharp didn't make the device on time, thus the new OS was promoted via PDAs of other manufacturers. Journalists spotted PDAs from LG, Casio, NEC and Compaq. Our today's guest was released in 1997 and had a number of advantages. Let's take a closer look. Let's start, as always, with an exterior. The entire case is made of plastic. 3 different types of plastic can be found on the surface. The gray plastic on the top cover is smooth, but its color imitates metallic. Next to it is darker plastic with a shagreen texture. The texture is so obvious that I think you could easily grate garlic on it if you wanted. The lower part made from regular smooth gray plastic. A few words about quality of assembly. I had no opportunity to handle this device 30 years ago, but now it creaks and crunches like an old gate. In comparison to Cyan, the points of assembly clearly do not go to Sharp. On the lid, we can see Sharp logo and nothing more. On the front side, from the left to right, microphone, warning indicator, mode, reset button, record button, top cover release button, stylus, and under it PCMCA card removal button. There are also small dots at the front that make it easier to position your hand to open the lid and improve your finger's grip. The bottom edge of this device is more interesting. There is a mode switch on top. It has a standard position and a position for replacing the primary and secondary batteries. In order to replace backup battery, you should switch lever to the appropriate position and remove this cover. Near it, you can find memory bay. In addition, at the bottom we have stickers containing information about model and power sources. The battery, as you can understand from those trendy layers of electrical tape, is not new. Humanity has come a long way in recent years, but when we talk about 2.4 volts batteries, things are just as bad as they were 30 years ago. The original battery had a capacity of 2450 mAh. I installed a slightly larger one, but I have no tools to test its actual capacity. Let's turn our attention to the insides. Like in many laptops from that time, here we can find a rather interesting mechanism which was created to prevent the lid from wobbling. Back then, it was more difficult to create a reliable hinge at a reasonable price when recognizing human handwriting with a calculator. I mean, it was quite difficult. Keyboard looks like plenty of independent keys with significant space between them. The process of typing seems to me comfortable, but it cannot hold a candle to working on cyan. There are not so many additional functions here, and you can use the secondary function of the buttons via the Alt key. There are also quick access buttons for apps. We'll talk about the apps a bit later, but now I need to say a few words about things hidden under the case. The heart of this PDA is CPU based on MIPS architecture. A few words about theory which might seem quite rude for someone. If you feel so, you can correct me in the comments. Globally, there are currently two most popular architectures. One is CISC, the other is RISC. The first one you can find with 95% probability in your home PC, i.e. Core i, Ryzen, and so on. The second one are almost guaranteed to be found in your mobile phone, i.e. Snapdragons, Exynos, and more like these two. The difference between the former and later is quite significant, and we can say that it lies in philosophy of these architectures. CISC is about versatility, complex tasks, and fair amount of power consumption. RISC is about energy efficiency. There are many variations within RISC, and one of them is our MIPS. Inside of the OS it's called MIPS 4000, but online sources say its real name is slightly different. PR31700. Sound like music, doesn't it? It has 16 MB of memory, and that's shared memory. This includes both ROM and RAM. The screen, as you can understand from the label on the right, it's color. You can distinguish 256 colors on it. It's not much, but back then, things were different. The ability to use a device with color display instead of the one having shades of gray was quite fashionable, and it was a very good selling point, although it didn't help the Game Gear. The screen resolution is 640 to 240 pixels. Its diagonal is 5 inches, which gives approximately 105 ppi. For comparison, a 27-inch 2K screen gives 108 ppi. Our PDA's dimensions are 186 to 95 to 30 centimeters and weight 495 grams. For comparison, our familiar Samsung S24 Ultra. So, let's dive into the system. With the first launch, we are traditionally offered to fill in date, time, location, etc. After completing the initial setup, we find ourselves in a desktop typical for the mid-90s. Everything here is simultaneously familiar and different, like a city you left 10 years ago. Let's go to the local My Computer, and after it, we are going directly to the control panel, from left to right, we have backlight and brightness control. Here you can find advice, use keys. Thanks for that. Communications. Some models had a built-in fax model located here. In our case, there is an RDA port and the option to connect a fax model to the PCMCA slot if we have model for it. Battery drain. A very useful feature. Really only needed a couple of times in your life. Display settings, which aren't really display settings but background settings. Keyboard settings. Owner information. Password. Power. Battery status information in the form of good, bad is very informative. In reality, it's not, and it's very frustrating. Regional settings. Touch input calibration, 5-point calibration plus double tap test. System. Here you can see some false information about the processor, slightly more accurate information about the RAM, and completely accurate information about the operating system. In the Memory tab, you can move the slider between RAM and storage. A lot of fun. As a reminder, 16 MB is total memory. Sound settings. Wall clock. Software usage.
Test 1, 2, 3, test.
Microsoft included a number of useful programs out of the box. Problems arose immediately afterward. The main problem is that you cannot simply launch any software from a large computer. But in the OS, everything pretends to be something similar. What kind of software is possible to start up? You can use something specifically built for the MIPS processor, and there are some really big problems with that. I somehow found a couple of programs which functionality we'll test now. It's also important to understand that most of the programs will be released later, and compatibility with earlier versions of operating system isn't always guaranteed. Future software developers will learn from these mistakes. A few words about additional features. Many advertising materials depict the PDA not alone, but in a package with some kind of device. This is surprise digital camera, a 640 to 480 PCMCA camera with optical zoom. As you can see, my kit doesn't include a camera, but it was a great device for the whole series. So, a few more words about it. As you may have noticed, connecting a camera requires a PCMCA slot, but the problem is that device has neither any other slots nor any internal memory. So it leads us to internal memory. It is the main obstacle to successful usage of the camera. This is the Handheld device according to Sharp, developed with direct Microsoft involvement. Why is there not so much information about it that it hasn't even received a Wikipedia article yet? Basically because the platform, SDK and a specific processor don't really allow much. And it leads to the second issue, the device's dubious commercial success. Speaking of commercial success, the price at launch was $900 and additional camera was $400. On the plus side, you got a rather interesting computer with a color screen that you could carry around where you want in your large business pockets. How do you like the device? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you soon.